It was the kind of property you bought not for the land, but for the silence it promised. For 50 cents at a county auction, he purchased a deed, a legend, and 3 graves on the hillside. Everyone in the valley knew the homestead was cursed. 3 owners, 3 sudden deaths. But the truth hiding in the collapsing barn wasn't a ghost. It was a woman and a child living in the dark, running from the real reason the land was damned. His name was Eli, a drifter with $20 to his name and a need to disappear. The homestead was a perfect tomb for a man running from his past, but the past was already there, waiting in the shadows, and it had a heartbeat. This is the story of a curse that wasn't supernatural but human. A story of what happens when you buy a secret, and the secret is alive, and of the 3 dead men who came before, and the violent reason they had to die. Eli arrived in early October, the sky the color of cold iron. He came on foot, his pack holding little more than a blanket, a tin cup, and the weight of bad decisions. The auction had been held in a dusty courthouse 2 counties over. When the gavel fell for the final bid, there were no congratulations, only a slow shuffling of papers and the clerk's flat warning. You know what they say about that place. The homestead sat at the end of a forgotten road, a mile from the nearest neighbor. The first thing Eli saw was the fence, or what remained of it. Posts leaned at drunken angles, wire sagging like old guitar strings. Then the house, a single-story box of grayed timber with a roof that dipped in the middle as if sighing. And behind it, the barn, its doors hanging open on broken hinges, a dark mouth in the fading light. He pushed open the front door and the smell hit him first. Not decay, but emptiness. Dust, dry rot, and the faint, sweet scent of old hay carried on a draft. The floors were bare wood, scarred and unwashed. In the main room, a stone fireplace held the ashes of a fire that had died years ago. A single chair lay on its side, one leg snapped clean off. Nothing else. No table, no curtains, no sign that anyone had ever lived here with any kind of peace. That first night, Eli slept on the floor wrapped in his blanket, listening to the symphony of a dying house. Mice skittered in the walls. The wind found every crack and seam, whistling through rooms it had claimed as its own. And once, just before dawn, a sound like a soft cough came from somewhere deep in the structure. He told himself it was the settling of old beams. Morning brought a brittle sunlight. Eli walked the property line, counting the 3 graves on the hillside. Simple wooden crosses, names weathered away to faint grooves. The first owner, they said in town, had been a trapper named Harlan, found at the bottom of his own dry well, neck broken, autumn of 1887. The second, a miner named Cooper, bought the place for a song 2 years later. He lasted 6 months before a rifle he was cleaning discharged into his chest. An accident, the sheriff said. The third was a widower named Miller. He simply vanished one winter. They found his frozen body in the spring, half a mile from the house, curled up as if sleeping. No marks, no reason. Cursed, the old-timers at the general store nodded. Land that don't want to be owned. Eli didn't believe in curses. He believed in bad luck and worse men. He had been both. He'd left Kansas after a card game turned bloody, a man lying still on a saloon floor, and Eli running with nothing but the clothes on his back and a new name. This place, with its silence and its shame, felt like a fitting penance. For a week he worked. He patched the worst holes in the roof with scavenged tin. He cleared the choked chimney. He swept out years of dirt and animal nests. The work was hard and mindless, and it almost let him forget the eyes he felt on him, sometimes from the tree line. Almost. The nearest town was a cluster of 20 buildings called Bitter Creek. The general store was run by a man named Henderson, who had a face like a clenched fist and eyes that missed nothing. When Eli went for supplies, Henderson took his money slowly. "Heard you took the Miller place." "I did." Henderson grunted, bagging flour and beans. 3 previous owners, all dead. "You a gambling man, mister." "Just Eli." "You a gambling man, just Eli." "I'm a surviving man." Another grunt, the money slid across the counter. "Well, you watch yourself out there. Some say it's the land. Some say it's something in that barn. Never could keep livestock. They'd get spooked, break fences, run themselves ragged. Miller, he was convinced something was stealing his chickens at night. Never found a feather." Eli carried the supplies back, the words turning in his mind. Something in that barn. The barn was the largest structure, a cathedral of shadows and dust. Eli had avoided it, focusing on making the house barely habitable. But on the 8th day, curiosity and necessity drove him inside. He needed tools, and the previous owners must have left something. The interior was a cavern of still, thick air. Shafts of light cut through gaps in the walls, illuminating swirling galaxies of dust. Ancient harnesses hung from rusted nails. A broken wagon sat with one wheel missing, and at the far end, a ladder led up to a loft. The hay up there was old, musty, a brown mountain in the semi-dark. That's when he saw the first thing that didn't fit. Near the base of the ladder, partly covered in straw, was a modern tin can. Its label was faded but not gone. It had contained peaches. The edges of the opened lid were sharp, not rusted smooth. This wasn't years old. It was months old, maybe weeks. Eli's skin prickled. He stood perfectly still, listening beyond the thump of his own heart. The barn was silent, but it was a watchful silence. He left slowly, not turning his back on the loft. That night he lay awake. The sounds were different now. They weren't just the house settling, a faint creak from the direction of the barn, a soft, rhythmic scratching, maybe a branch, he thought, but there were no trees close to the barn. He began to notice other things. The pile of firewood he'd split by the back door was slightly smaller one morning. A handful of beans went missing from the sack in his makeshift pantry. At first, he thought it was raccoons or his own poor memory, but raccoons didn't open cupboards, and he remembered counting those beans. The fear in Bitter Creek was palpable, but it was the wrong kind of fear. They were afraid of a ghost story, a curse. Eli was starting to be afraid of something real, someone real. 2 weeks in, he found the button. A small, mother-of-pearl button nestled in the dirt just outside the barn doors. It was clean, recently lost. It was a woman's button. His mind raced. A squatter, another drifter like him hiding out, but the button suggested a woman. And the stolen food was small amounts, survival rations, not theft for profit. He confronted Henderson again, trying to sound casual. Anyone ever squat out on that land before Miller? Henderson's eyes narrowed. Squat? Why, you seen something? Just wondering, place is isolated. The storekeeper leaned forward, his voice dropping. Miller said that, last time I saw him alive, said he heard noises, said he felt watched. He got paranoid, bought a big new lock for the barn door, started carrying his rifle everywhere. Then one day he just wasn't there. Did he have family? A wife, pretty young thing, Lydia, she left, before he bought the place. Story was she ran off with a railroad man, left him bitter as gall. The pieces hovered in Eli's mind, not yet connecting, a missing wife, a paranoid man, a lock on the barn door. That afternoon, Eli walked to the barn with purpose. He ignored the ladder and the loft. Instead, he went to the back wall, behind the old wagon. He began pulling away rotten hay bales and piles of discarded lumber. The dust choked him. His hands were raw. And then he found the door. It was set flush into the back wall, made of newer, heavier wood than the barn's siding. It was painted the same gray, nearly invisible, and it was secured by a heavy, modern padlock, the lock Miller had bought. The lock was not fastened. It hung open on the hasp, as if someone had unlocked it in a hurry and never returned. Eli's breath caught. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and lifted the lock. It was cold and heavy in his palm. He pulled the hasp free. The door didn't budge. He put his shoulder against it and pushed. With a groan of protesting wood, it swung inward, revealing not another part of the barn, but a small, dark space built between the outer wall and the foundation of the hill behind it. A secret room. The smell that wafted out was not dust. It was the close, lived-in smell of unwashed skin, of damp wool, of human breath. A sliver of light from the barn door fell across the floor inside, illuminating a rough wool blanket, an empty water canteen, and a child's wooden toy horse carved by hand. This was not a hiding place for tools. This was a cell. And as Eli stood there, the hair on the back of his neck stood up. He wasn't alone. He slowly turned around, looking back into the main barn toward the mountain of hay in the loft. A faint movement. A single, wide, terrified eye, reflecting the light from the door, stared back at him from between two bales of hay. It was there for only a second before it vanished back into the darkness. But it was enough. The curse wasn't in the land, it was alive, and it was hiding in his barn. For a long minute, Eli didn't move. He stood frozen in the barn's chill, the open secret door at his back, his eyes locked on the spot in the hayloft where the eye had been. The silence was no longer empty. It was charged, listening. He took a slow step forward, his boots crunching softly on the dirt floor. "I know you're there," he said, his voice echoing too loud in the space. "I'm not going to hurt you." Nothing, not a rustle. "I found the room," he continued, keeping his tone low, even. "I saw the blanket, the toy. You can't stay up there forever." A tiny choked sound escaped the loft. A whimper quickly stifled. It wasn't an adult sound. It was a child trying desperately to be quiet. That single noise severed something in Eli's chest. The fear of a ghost or a thief evaporated, replaced by a colder, more terrible understanding. He walked to the base of the ladder and looked up into the darkness. "Please," he said, the word foreign on his tongue, "come down. I have food in the house." More silence, then a whisper so faint he almost missed it. "You'll send us back." It was a woman's voice, frayed with exhaustion and terror. The "us" confirmed everything. "I won't send you anywhere," Eli said. "I give you my word, just come down." The hay shifted. Slowly, a shape emerged from the shadows at the edge of the loft. First, he saw the dirty soles of bare feet, then the hem of a dress that might have been white once, now stained the color of earth and old hay. She descended the ladder backwards, one careful rung at a time, her body tense as a coiled spring. When she reached the bottom and turned, Eli's breath caught. She was younger than he expected, maybe 25, but hardship had carved years into her face. Her dark hair was a tangled nest strewn with pieces of straw. Her eyes, a startling pale blue, were wide with an animal fear, but beneath it was a fierce, defiant light. And clutched against her leg, half hidden by her skirts, was a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 3 or 4, with his mother's eyes and a face smudged with dirt. He stared at Eli with pure, unblinking terror. They stood 10 feet apart in the dusty barn light, a tableau of shock and survival. Eli held up his empty hands. "My name is Eli. I own this place now." The woman's gaze darted past him to the open secret door, then back to his face. Her knuckles were white where she gripped her son's shoulder. "Lydia," she whispered, "my name is Lydia Miller, and this is Jacob." Miller, the last owner's name, the missing wife who supposedly ran off with a railroad man. "You're supposed to be gone," Eli said softly. "They said you left him." A bitter, silent laugh shook her shoulders. "Left him? Is that what they say in town?" She took a halting step forward, her eyes never leaving his. "He locked me in that room, Mr. Eli, for the better part of a year. The barn was my prison, the homestead was my cage. He didn't go mad from a curse, he was the curse." The words landed like stones. Eli thought of the heavy padlock, the hidden door, the paranoid man buying locks and carrying his rifle. He hadn't been afraid of a ghost, he'd been guarding his secret. "Why?" Eli asked. "Because I tried to leave him," she said, her voice gaining a thin, sharp edge. "The first time, he found me at the train depot in Bitter Creek. He didn't shout. He just took my arm, smiled at the ticket man, and said, 'Change of plans, darling.' He brought me back here. He showed me the room he'd built. He said if I ever tried again, he'd put Jacob in there instead. So I stayed. I was quiet. I was perfect." She looked down at her son, who had buried his face in her dress, "Until I saw my chance. He'd gotten drunk, fallen asleep with the key on the nightstand. I took it. I took Jacob and I ran, not to the road. He'd checked the road. I ran into the woods. I thought we could hide, wait for him to give up, then get to the next county. But he woke up. He came after us." Her story was spilling out now, urgent and broken. "He had the rifle. He was shouting. We were by the old creek bed. Jacob was crying. I pushed him, my husband. He stumbled on the rocks. The rifle, it went off." She closed her eyes, the memory playing across her face like a shadow. The sound was so loud. "He fell into the creek. There was so much blood in the water, I thought he was dead. I took the rifle. I dragged Jacob into the woods. We hid for 2 days. When I crept back, he was gone. No body, just a stain on the stones. I thought maybe he'd crawled away, died somewhere. I was too scared to go to town. They'd call me a murderer. They'd take Jacob, so we came back here. To the one place no one would look. We've been living in his barn, hiding from his ghost, for 8 months. Eli tried to process the avalanche of information: a hidden prisoner, an attempted escape, a shooting, a missing, presumed dead husband. The 3 Grav on the hill had a new, grim candidate. But the timeline was wrong. Miller vanished last winter. You said 8 months. That's almost a year. The sheriff found no body. I know, she said, despair creeping into her voice. And then the others came. Others? The first one, Holland the Trapper. He bought the place after whatever happened to my husband. He was a rough man, loud. He used the barn to skin his catches. One night he found the secret room. He found some of my things I'd had to leave behind. A hairpin, a scrap of Jacob's blanket. He started poking around, asking in town about Miller's missing wife. 2 weeks later, he was dead in the well. You think? I didn't push him, Eli, but I was in the woods that night. I saw a man, not my husband, a different man, standing by the well after Harlan fell. He just stood there, then he walked away into the dark. Eli's mind reeled. An accomplice, a witness who became something else. Then Cooper the miner, Lydia continued, her voice dropping to a haunted whisper. He was kinder, quieter. He fixed the porch. He found Jacob's wooden horse where he dropped it. He didn't go to town. He started leaving food out on the porch step at night. A little bread, an apple. He knew he was trying to help or trap us. I didn't know. I was too scared to take it. Then one evening I heard the shot from inside the house. The single rifle shot. The accident. I saw the same man, Eli. The same man from the well, walking away from the house through the trees. A pattern was forming, ugly and clear. Someone was ensuring the homestead's owners didn't stay alive long enough to discover its secret, or to help the secret escape. You think my husband is alive, Lydia said, stating the dread that had been curdling in Eli's gut. You think he's been watching this place, killing anyone who gets too close to finding me. It made a terrible sense. A man so possessive he'd build a prison for his wife wouldn't just die in a creek. He would become a ghost, a guardian of his grotesque property. The curse wasn't supernatural. It was a man with a rifle and a monstrous secret to protect. Eli looked from Lydia's exhausted, desperate face to little Jacob's silent one. He had bought a 50-cent deed and walked into a live minefield of a man's obsession. He was the 4th owner. We have to go to the sheriff, Eli said. And say what? Lydia's eyes flashed with sudden, furious life. That I, a woman accused of abandoning my husband, who is legally dead, have been hiding in a barn for a year. That I shot him, but he might be alive and murdering people. They'll lock me in an asylum. They'll take Jacob. Or worse, if he is asterisk out there, the moment we step into the open, he'll finish what he started. She was right. The law was a blunt instrument. It would break them before it protected them. Then what do we do? Eli asked, the weight of the situation settling on him. You leave, she said, her defiance returning. You pack your things tonight and you walk away. You tell them in Bitter Creek the curse got to you, that you heard voices. They'll believe it. Then he has no reason to hurt you. This ends with us. It always was going to. Eli looked around the barn, at the home he'd started to patch together, at the 2 fragile lives shivering before him. He thought of the man in Kansas, the life he'd run from. He was a drifter, not a hero. Every instinct told him to do what she said, to run. Jacob chose that moment to peek out from behind his mother's dress. He looked at Eli, his little brow furrowed. You have a nice hat, he whispered. It was such a small, absurd human thing. It shattered Eli's resolve to flee. He couldn't leave them. Not to the mercy of a phantom in the woods, a husband turned hunter. I'm not leaving, Eli said, the words firm. And you're not staying in this barn. You're coming to the house. Lydia shook her head violently. No, he watches the house. I know he does. All the more reason, Eli said. If he's out there, let him see. Let him see you're not hiding anymore. Let him see you're not alone. It was a reckless, dangerous gamble. They would be bait in a trap with an unknown trigger, but the slow, hidden war of the past year had to end. Eli helped them gather their meager possessions from the loft, a thin bedroll, a cracked cup, the wooden horse. As they stepped out of the barn and into the late afternoon light, Eli felt a prickling on his neck, the unmistakable sensation of being watched from the distant, dark line of the forest. He set them up in the small bedroom he'd been using, giving them the bed. He made a stew from his dwindling supplies, and the three of them ate in silence at the makeshift table, the first hot meal Lydia and Jacob had shared indoors in nearly a year. The boy fell asleep quickly, curled in his mother's lap by the fire. "You're risking everything for strangers," Lydia said, staring into the flames. "I'm not risking it for strangers," Eli replied quietly. "I'm risking it because it's right, and because I've spent enough of my life running from bad men." That night, Eli took the first watch. He sat in the chair by the front window, Miller's old rifle, which he'd found cleaned and oiled in a closet, across his knees. The moon was a sliver, offering little light. Every rustle in the wind, every creak of the old house, felt like a footstep. He thought about the man in the woods, a phantom who killed to protect his property, a man who might be watching the glow of their window right now. Just before dawn, as the sky lightened to a deep gray, he saw it, a brief, flickering pinpoint of light deep in the trees at the edge of the property line, like a match being struck, then quickly cupped and extinguished. Someone was out there, smoking, waiting. The message was clear. He knew they were together in the house. The hunt was no longer for a hidden wife. It was for all of them. Eli gripped the rifle stock, his heart pounding a hard, steady rhythm against his ribs. The quiet war was over. The open siege had begun. The light in the trees didn't appear again, but its memory hung in the air, a silent declaration of war. Sunrise brought no comfort, only a heightened sense of the invisible line that had been crossed. Eli spent the day in a state of heightened vigilance, his movements sharp and efficient. He boarded up the broken window in the kitchen from the inside, leaving only a narrow slit to see out. He checked every door, every latch. The rifle never left his side. Lydia moved through the house like a ghost, relearning its shape. She cleaned, not out of habit, but as a way to map the territory, to find every potential weapon and hiding spot. She showed Eli the loose floorboard in the hallway, where Miller had kept a box of spare ammunition. She pointed out which window sashes were swollen shut, which would scream if forced open. Her knowledge of the house was intimate and grim, the expertise of a prisoner. Jacob, sensitive to the fear he couldn't understand, became Eli's silent shadow. He would sit on the floor near Eli's feet while he worked, playing quietly with his wooden horse. Once, he reached out and touched the stock of the rifle leaning against the wall. "Is that for the bad man?" he asked, his voice small. "Yes," Eli said, the admission heavy in his throat. Jacob nodded solemnly. "My papa had a gun. It was loud. It made Mama cry." Lydia, hearing this from the other room, went very still. She didn't turn around. That evening, as Eli took the water bucket to the well, he found the first tangible message. Nailed to the well's wooden housing was a dead crow, its wings splayed, a single rusted nail through its chest. It hadn't been there that morning. The message was primitive, brutal. Death was watching, and it could get close without a sound. He tore it down and buried it, saying nothing to Lydia. But she saw the dirt on his hands, the tight set of his jaw. She didn't ask. The isolation became a weapon. Every trip to the woodpile was an exposed journey. Every night sound was a potential footfall. They began to communicate in glances, in gestures, a finger to the lips, a nod toward a particular window, a shared, tense listening when the wind paused. 4 days after bringing them inside, Eli knew they couldn't just wait. They were on a starving piece of land, with dwindling supplies and an enemy who had all the time in the world. He needed to force a move to change the game. He decided to go to Bitter Creek. "I need supplies," he told Lydia, "and I need to listen. If he's out there, maybe he said something in town, a boast, a threat." "It's a trap," she said immediately, her face pale. "He'll be waiting on the road." "Probably," Eli agreed. "That's why you're coming with me." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Hear me out," he said. "We take the wagon. You and Jacob hide under a tarp in the back with the rifle. If he ambushes me on the road, he'll focus on the driver. You'll have the shot. It's the one move he won't expect. He thinks you're a rabbit hiding. We show him you're not." It was a desperate, violent plan. It relied on Lydia's nerve with a firearm she might never have fired. She looked at her hands, then at Jacob, who was watching them with solemn eyes. Slowly, she nodded. They left at first light, the wagon creaking along the rutted path. The tarp in the back covered a small nest of blankets, with Lydia and Jacob tucked beneath, a narrow gap left for her to see and breathe. The rifle was loaded and laid across her lap. Eli could feel the tension radiating from the back of the wagon like heat. The woods pressed close on either side of the road. Every shadow was a man, every rustle was a cocking hammer. Eli's hand rested on the revolver in his coat pocket, his senses screaming. They were halfway to town when it happened. A figure stepped out from behind a thick pine directly into the center of the road. It was Miller. It was Henderson, the storekeeper from Bitter Creek. He held no weapon. His hands were raised, but his face was grim. "Stop the wagon, Eli." Eli reined in the mules, his heart hammering. "What is it, Henderson?" The storekeeper walked closer, his eyes scanning the wagon, lingering on the lump under the tarp. "You need to turn around, go back, don't come to town." "Why?" Eli's voice was tight. "Because there's a U.S. Marshal in my store asking questions about you. Says your name ain't Eli. Says you're wanted for murder in Kansas." The ground seemed to tilt under Eli. His past, the corpse on the saloon floor, had finally stretched its long shadow to this forgotten place. "He's lying," Eli said, the words automatic, hollow. "Is he?" Henderson's gaze was pitiless. "He's also asking about the Miller place, about the missing wife. He showed me a poster for a woman named Lydia Miller, wanted for questioning in the disappearance of her husband, said there might be a reward for information." The trap wasn't in the woods. It was in the town. Miller, or whoever was out there, hadn't just been watching. He'd been planning. He'd brought the law, weaponizing their pasts against them. Henderson took a step closer, his voice dropping. "Listen to me. I don't know what's true, but that marshal, he ain't right. He asked too many questions about the previous owners, about how they died, not like a lawman checking a story, like a man cataloging his own work." A cold dread, deeper than any before, seeped into Eli's bones. The man in the woods wasn't just a jealous husband. He was a lawman, a U.S. Marshal. He had the authority to ask questions, to enter homes, to take people away. And he had used that authority to systematically eliminate anyone who got close to his hidden wife. Harlan, Cooper. He'd killed them not just as a possessive husband, but under the color of the law, tidying up his own messy secret. "He's the marshal," Eli whispered, the horror of it dawning fully. Henderson gave a slow, grim nod. "I think so, and he's waiting for you. Now turn this wagon around, get off my road." Eli didn't need to be told twice. He turned the wagon in a tight, clumsy circle, the mules protesting. As they headed back the way they came, he heard Henderson call out one last thing. "And Eli, the man in your barn, he wasn't the only one keeping someone hidden." The words chased them down the road. Back in the house, under the crushing weight of this new revelation, Eli told Lydia everything. The marshal, the wanted posters. Her face went from fear to a strange, frozen calm. "His name is Sam Carter," she said, her voice detached, as if speaking of a stranger. "He wasn't always a marshal. He was a Pinkerton man first, a detective for the railroad. That's how we met. He was charming, protective. He said he could keep me safe from the world." She wrapped her arms around herself. The protection became a cage. The detective work, he started using it on me, watching me, following me, knowing my every move before I made it. When I tried to leave the first time, that's when he built the room. He said it was for my own safety, to help me think about what I was throwing away. She looked at Eli, her eyes hollow. "He didn't just hide me, Eli, he hid himself. He created a dead husband, a tragic story, so he could keep me forever, and he used his badge to make sure no one ever found out." The enormity of the man's deception was staggering. He had orchestrated his own death, framed his wife for it, and then used his position to hunt down anyone who stumbled near the truth. He was judge, jury, and executioner, wrapped in a federal badge. The sound of a horse's whinny from outside cut through the silence. Sharp, close. Eli rushed to the window. A single rider was coming up the path at a walk. He wore a long duster and a wide-brimmed hat. A U.S. Marshal's star was pinned to his chest, catching the afternoon light. Sam Carter had grown tired of waiting. He stopped his horse 50 yards from the porch, well out of easy rifle range. He sat easy in the saddle, a man in complete control. "Eli Thatcher," he called out, his voice carrying authoritative and smooth. "I am United States Marshal Sam Carter. I have warrants for your arrest and for the questioning of one Lydia Miller. You will both come out, unarmed, with your hands raised." Eli's mind raced. If they went out, Carter would take them. He'd kill Eli on the road for resisting and take Lydia and Jacob back into his private hell with the full authority of the law to cover it. If they stayed, he would lay siege. He had all the time and legitimacy in the world. Lydia appeared beside him, Jacob clutching her leg. She looked at the man on the horse, her husband, her jailer, the author of all her nightmares, and something in her face hardened into flint. "He's not taking my son," she said, her voice barely audible, "ever again." Eli made a decision. He opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch, leaving the rifle inside. He kept his hands visible. "I'll come," he shouted. "The woman and child are not here. They left days ago. I'm alone." Carter smiled, a slow, cold stretching of the lips that didn't reach his eyes. He believed none of it. "Now we both know that's a lie, son. I saw your little wagon trip this morning, saw the interesting shape in the back. Bring her out, and I might be persuaded to be lenient with you." This was it, the open siege. The marshal had them cornered, outgunned, and outmatched by the very institution that was supposed to protect them. From the trees, Eli could now make out the shapes of 2 more men on horseback, deputies or hired guns, moving to flank the house. Carter hadn't come alone. Eli stepped back inside and closed the door, bolting it. He met Lydia's terrified eyes. They were surrounded. The law had come to the cursed Homestead, but the law was the monster, and it was just now beginning its final, official assault. Inside the bolted house, the air was thick with the silence of a tomb. Eli looked from Lydia's terrified face to the heavy door, knowing the man outside had every legal right to break it down. Marshal Carter's voice came again, calm and commanding. "You have 1 minute to comply, then we come in." Eli's mind, sharpened by a lifetime of narrow escapes, seized on a single, desperate fact. Carter didn't want a public spectacle. He wanted a quiet resolution. He'd killed Harlan and Cooper in ways that looked like accidents or solitude. He was here with only 2 trusted men, not a posse. He needed this to look clean. "He's lying," Eli said quickly, his voice low and urgent. "He doesn't have warrants. He can't. He's officially a dead man. If he had real papers, he'd have brought the county sheriff. This is him cleaning up his own mess, alone." Lydia's eyes widened with a flicker of hope. "Then what do we do?" "We make it loud," Eli said. "We make it so the whole county hears." He pointed to the old cast-iron dinner bell hanging from a post outside the kitchen window. "I'm going to run for that bell and ring it until my arm falls off. The sound will carry for miles. Someone will come. He won't be able to explain 3 dead bodies and a kidnapped woman with an audience." It was a thin chance. The nearest farm was a mile away, but it was the only weapon they had left: exposure. Eli grabbed the rifle and handed it to Lydia. "Cover the door. If they rush it before I get to the bell, you know what to do." She took the weapon, her hands steadying as she checked the load. Her gaze met his. "I do." Eli took a deep breath, unbolted the back kitchen door, and burst out into the open. He didn't look back. He sprinted, legs pumping, toward the bell 15 yards away. A shout went up from the front of the house. A gunshot cracked, and dirt kicked up near his feet. He didn't falter. He reached the post, grabbed the rope, and began to swing the heavy iron clapper with all his strength. The sound was deafening, a clarion crash of metal that shattered the pastoral silence. It echoed off the hills, a frantic, pounding alarm. He kept ringing, each ring a hammer blow against Carter's carefully constructed silence. From the corner of his eye, he saw one of the deputies round the corner of the house, pistol raised. Then a rifle shot barked from the kitchen window. The deputy cried out, clutching his arm, his pistol falling to the dirt. "Lydia." Eli kept ringing. The second deputy appeared, more cautious, firing toward the kitchen window. The glass shattered. Eli saw Carter himself then, striding around the front of the house, his face a mask of cold fury. He raised his own revolver, aiming not at Eli, but at the kitchen window where Lydia was. The bell's peals were already doing their work. From the road, a new sound emerged, the rumble of wagon wheels, fast and urgent, then another and another. Heads appeared over the rise. Henderson, the storekeeper, standing in his wagon, a shotgun in hand. Behind him, 3 more wagons filled with men from Bitter Creek. They had heard the bell, the gunshots. The curse had drawn them once, but this time it was the sound of a fight they could no longer ignore. Carter saw them coming. He hesitated, his plan unraveling in the face of witnesses. He lowered his gun, his eyes calculating a new story. The wagons skidded to a halt in the yard, men pouring out, weapons at the ready. "What in God's name is going on here?" Henderson demanded, his shotgun held level. "This man is harboring a fugitive," Carter announced, his marshal's star gleaming. "I am here on federal authority." Eli finally stopped ringing the bell, his arm screaming in pain. He stepped forward, his voice ringing clear in the sudden quiet. "That man is Sam Carter. He's supposed to be dead. He's been murdering the owners of this land for over a year to hide the fact that he imprisoned his wife here. Ask him where he was when Harlan fell down that well. Ask him about the rifle that killed Cooper." The men from Bitter Creek shifted uneasily, looking from the wounded deputy to Carter's too-clean duster. The story of the cursed Homestead had a new human villain. Lydia stepped out of the kitchen door then, Jacob held tightly in one arm, the rifle in her other hand. She faced the crowd, her voice trembling but clear. "His name is Sam Carter. He built a prison in that barn. He told the world I ran away, and he's been killing anyone who got close to the truth. He's not a marshal. He's my husband, and he's a murderer." The revelation hung in the air. Carter's mask slipped completely. "You stupid girl," he snarled, taking a step toward her. "You ruin everything you touch." That was his mistake. In front of 24 witnesses, he showed them the man beneath the badge. Henderson raised his shotgun higher. "I think you'd best drop that iron, Marshal. We'll let the circuit judge sort this out." Carter looked at the ring of grim, armed faces. He saw no way out. Slowly, he bent and placed his revolver on the ground. His 2 deputies, one wounded, did the same. The men from Bitter Creek took them into custody, using their own handcuffs on Carter. As they led him away to a wagon, he turned his head and locked eyes with Lydia. There was no love there, only a bottomless, possessive hatred. She met his gaze without flinching, holding her son closer. In the days that followed, the truth unraveled like a rotten rope. The real U.S. Marshals, contacted by a terrified county sheriff, confirmed Carter had been officially listed as deceased after abandoning his post over a year earlier. He had kept his badge and used it to create his own dark kingdom. The bodies of Harlan and Cooper were exhumed, and the evidence, a pushed well cover, a rifle with fingerprints that matched Carter's, was damning. The man who had been the curse was finally placed in a real prison to await trial for multiple murders. Eli's past caught up with him too. The marshal from Kansas arrived, but the story of Bitter Creek had spread. The man Eli had killed in that card game was a known cheater and bully, and Eli had acted in self-defense after being cornered. With the testimony of the townsfolk and the extraordinary circumstances, the marshal agreed to let the local judge handle it. Eli was given a suspended sentence for fleeing, on the condition he stay in the territory and out of trouble. The homestead, its curse broken, began a slow transformation. Eli and Lydia, bound by trauma and a fierce, hard-won loyalty, worked the land together. It was not a sudden romance, but a gradual turning, like a field after a long winter. They married quietly a year later, with Henderson and his wife as witnesses. Jacob, who had started calling Eli Pa of his own accord, held the ring. They never became wealthy. The land was still hard, the weather unforgiving, but the fear was gone. The shadows in the woods were just shadows. They tore down the secret room in the barn and burned the wood. They filled in the old well. They planted a garden where the 3 Grav had been, and over time, wildflowers grew there. Final surprise came 5 years after Carter was locked away. A letter arrived, forwarded from the prison. Carter had died of a fever behind bars. With his last breath, he confessed one more thing. The 3rd grave on the hill, the one belonging to the original owner before Miller, an old hermit, that death had been natural. Carter had simply seen the opportunity. He moved the body, planted the story of a curse, and used the fear to keep people away. The curse had always been just a man. A man who knew how to use fear better than any ghost. Eli read the letter, then tossed it into the fireplace. He walked out onto the porch where Lydia sat shelling peas, Jacob, now a sturdy boy of 8, chasing chickens in the yard. The homestead was no longer a cursed place. It was simply home, a home paid for with 50 cents and built with something far more valuable, the refusal to look away from someone else's darkness and the courage to stand against it. The story of the cursed homestead of Bitter Creek faded into local legend, a tale told to children about how sometimes the worst monsters wear familiar faces, and how sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to stop running and ring the bell. So what do we make of a story like this? A story that begins with a curse and ends with a garden. For decades, the people of Bitter Creek spoke of the land as if it were poisoned, a place where fate itself turned cruel. But the poison was never in the soil, it was in the human heart. Sam Carter weaponized superstition, used the very idea of a curse as camouflage for his crimes. He understood that people are more willing to believe in ghosts than in the monstrous potential of the man next door. The homestead stands to this day, though the house Eli and Lydia built eventually weathered away, replaced by newer structures. The property passed down through their family, a testament not to curse broken, but to a silence broken. The real magic wasn't in dispelling a phantom, but in the ordinary, grueling work of building a life on the foundation of a nightmare. It was in the daily choice to trust, to stay, to plant seeds in ground that had only ever grown fear. This story forces an uncomfortable question. How many of the places we call haunted or cursed are just hiding human truths? How many ghost stories are cover stories? We are drawn to tales of supernatural vengeance because they create order. A wronged spirit punishes the living. It's a cleaner, simpler justice. The reality is often messier and far more frightening. The monster isn't in the attic. He has a key to the front door. He wears a badge. He smiles at you in the street. Eli, the drifter, and Lydia, the prisoner, found their salvation not by escaping the cursed place, but by confronting what made it cursed. Their weapon wasn't a holy relic or an exorcism. It was a cast iron dinner bell. It was the courage to make a noise so loud that the world could no longer pretend not to hear. There is a postscript, one final note found in the county archives. Years after the trial, a surveyor mapping the region interviewed an elderly midwife who had served Bitter Creek in its earliest days. She spoke of the original hermit, the man in the first grave. He wasn't a wicked man, she said. He was a heartbroken one. His wife and child had been taken by fever. He lived alone on that land not because he hated people, but because their memory was the only company he could bear. The land wasn't cursed, it was grieving, and perhaps in the end, Eli and Lydia understood that better than anyone. They didn't conquer the grief of that place, they joined it, and in doing so, they transformed it. The next time you hear a story about a cursed house, a haunted barn, a place where tragedy seems to repeat, pause. Look past the ghost story. Ask instead, who benefits from the fear? What truth is too terrible to speak in daylight? And what would happen if someone, against all reason, decided to ring the bell? If you found this journey into the shadows behind a legend compelling, there are more stories like it waiting. Dark places with human hearts. Hit subscribe, and we'll keep exploring them together. Until next time.